Hi, my name is Karen, and I'm a neurodivergent person who lives with autism, food addiction, mental health, and codependency issues. And on this channel, I make videos on Christ centered, faith based mental health life skills. Today, I'm going to talk about food addiction. Food addiction is a chemical dependency and also sometimes a psychological addiction to food. People who have the chemical dependency to food often have a problem with things like sugar in flour and refined grains. And people with the psychological addiction may have the chemical dependency, but they also have issues with things like salt, fat, and sometimes dairy. It consists of having physical cravings and reacting to stressful situations and coping by binge eating, and then afterwards there is remorse, guilt, and physical discomfort, and sometimes even suicidal thoughts may be fleeting after a large binge, and then there's a resolve to quit, which is followed by the cravings again, and it's a vicious cycle of paying negative consequences, and the thing that you love the most, that you can't stop doing is really hurting you, even though you feel like you love it. Uh, in order to stay what we call abstinent, or I call food sober sometimes, is to restrain from the first bite. A lot of people have very different expectations of somebody that has a food addiction than they have with somebody that has a chemical dependency on something else, because they do not have the education and they see food addiction as a person needs to lose weight, the person just needs to go on a diet, and with a person who is an alcoholic, they won't be told by people who truly care about them that, hey, it's Christmas, it's fine, it's a wedding, have a drink, it's okay to have it on special occasions. But they will say to the food addict, it's Thanksgiving, have some pie, have some stuffing, or whatever the person is addicted to, because they don't understand it. They won't, somebody with alcoholism won't be told, well, you just need a little taste of it to take the craving away. You have to let yourself have a little bit of sweets now and then, but they won't say to an alcoholic, yeah, just take one sip of beer. You just need a taste of it to take away the cravings. And that's also an example of what's done out of ignorance, with people that have food addiction, and it's very frustrating. So not all people with food addiction are fat. Some of them are bulimics or exercise bulimics, that they may binge and purge either by vomiting or through laxatives or through excessive exercising. An exercise bulimia is somebody who might eat a piece of cake and then walk for miles and miles to after a binge or after eating something sweet in order to not gain weight, but the behavior is still a negative, destructive behavior. Um, there are food addicts who diet instead of really seeking to overcome the addiction. They think it's something that they can go on and off of, and they may, be thin because they have the diet mentality. But the problem with dieting with food addiction, it's part of the addiction, and that you'll lose and gain and lose and gain. And I have, at times lost a lot of weight just to gain it back, plus more. My personal experience with food addiction is, I think, that there was like I was vulnerable to it. I was what predisposition to it at an early age, that I loved sugar and stuff, but I wasn't overweight because the amount of sugar that I ate was controlled, and because I was a kid in the 1980s where you went outside and you played all day, and so I wasn't heavy. The real problem with compulsive overeating happened when I was having custody issues with my daughter, and it was a stressful time that I lost contact with her, and that's really whenever I ballooned up. And I have lost and gained, a lot of weight, before. What I do to help with my food addiction is I journal my food. Everything I eat, I write down. I take that journal to the dietitian I see once a month. I attend Christian Overeaters Anonymous meetings and the regular Overeaters Anonymous meetings and Celebrate Recovery meetings. Whenever I eat half a plate of non-starchy vegetables, and then there's a fourth that I usually have a fruit, but sometimes a starch, and another fourth of the plate with the protein, which is usually fish, and I eat the protein before I eat the other uh, foods because that's what the dietitian counseled me to do. I, my daily, God and I time in the morning is something that really helps with controlling my emotions, that in turn will help me to eat healthy. I've recently decided that I can't go to church dinners and potluck dinners and restaurants and stuff like that for a while. Whenever I get stronger in my recovery, I will start, going to those things again to be around people and to socialize. But until I get that amount of recovery and strength in, I'm not going to attempt it. And I keep trying hard no matter what. I have fallen many times, but I tried hundreds of times to quit smoking before I was successful. And so I feel like I need to keep trying with this because it's an even harder addiction, because I could live without cigarettes, but I cannot live without food. I have people, a sponsor I talk to. I read recovery devotionals, and whenever I want a snack, I eat a vegetable or a fruit. And I was told recently about writing a surrender letter to God each day, which I plan on trying to do. Things I don't do is I don't starve myself, although I sometimes do fast for religious reasons. And I'll make a video on that sometime. I don't really broadcast my weight loss or gain. I don't tell everybody it. Haven't, I haven't lost a lot of weight, but it's something that people can notice by looking at you, and I don't really feel to like to give a praise report at church that I've lost weight, because once I get, enough weight off, people are going to notice it. And the things that I do to eat, I try to do healthy. Uh, One side note I wanted to make is that even though I eat animal products, I don't think the people who are a vegan and a vegetarian should be made fun of or mocked. They're not telling you what you have to eat. You shouldn't make fun of them for eating what they eat. I don't think anybody should be made fun of or mocked for any reason. I don't do things like one of the behaviors of a food addict is they will eat healthy in public and then come home and binge. My experience with recovery meetings and all addictions meetings is that I prefer the Christian OA meeting, which is Christian Overeaters Anonymous, which is not affiliated with Overeaters Anonymous, the original group. I sometimes do the regular Overeaters Anonymous meetings. I have, okay, I have had some issues with the regular secular Overeaters Anonymous meetings. I felt like I had a hard time relating to a lot of the people because they usually come into the meetings and they are at first agnostic and atheist sometimes, or they choose to remain that way, or they might make up their own God or higher power. I had difficulty with some things that I disagreed with the book Alcoholics Anonymous that's used also in Overeaters Anonymous that's referred to as the big book even though the title is Alcoholics Anonymous. Of this book, it has a lot of good insights and a lot of good information, but there are things that I theologically disagree with in it, and I sometimes feel like the things that are I don't like the way people talk about it because they use the same phrases and sayings about the AA Big Book as they do the Bible. I've heard people try to say that the AA Big Book was divinely inspired, and one of the sayings that they've had about the Bible is that the a Bible falling apart usually belongs to a person who doesn't, and you have people that took that around and used the same saying that a big book that's falling apart usually belongs to a person who doesn't. And to me, that's not a good saying. It's like blasphemy. Um, I have always felt like I had to translate everything, like the prayers and stuff. It was just a hard time relating to it with my beliefs. I go to the meetings because it's not always easy to go to a faith based Christian meeting. And so sometimes I have to go to the secular meeting and I get good information and feedback there, but it's not as same as going to a meeting where people feel the same way as you. Also, I've had issues with people being pushy about their way of eating and wanting me to eat that way. And what works for me might not work for you. What works for you might not work for me. And so it's important that you, whenever you're relating to other people, that you don't tell them, what foods they should stay away from or how they should eat because different people have different health reasons of eating the way they do, and a food that they have a problem with, you might have not have a problem with, and a food that you have a problem with, they might not have a problem with. Uh, Christian OA literature includes a Life Recovery Bible, the Overeaters Anonymous Voices of Recovery, and Overeaters Anonymous for Today. the Alcoholics Anonymous Big Book, the Overeaters Anonymous 12-Step and 12 Tradition book, and the Life Recovery Workbook. The science and politics behind the chemical dependency to food ingredients. Sugar was not available in its highly processed form until a couple hundred years ago. They came out with white sugar, and then it developed into high fructose corn syrup. Some people have problems with artificial sweeteners or stevia, and some don't. So sugar is fairly new because it wasn't around for thousands and thousands of years, as long as man's been around, and our bodies are not adapt to uh, using it the way that they are adapt to use other food. Sugar was once harvested when they first started growing cane sugar and having plantations. It was grown and harvested in the beginning by slaves, and a lot of the countries that employ people to work with the sugar cane and the farms, they do not pay them a fair wage because they're not required to in those countries. The sugar industry and the food lobbyists, they really don't have the people's best interests at heart. Their job is to sell food. And they're going to sell food that appeals the most to people. And whenever there are laws being passed and stuff, they aren't admitting to just how addictive sugar is, or they're paying lobbyists to buy politicians essentially to vote the way that they want them to vote on legislation. And my thing is that the politicians are in office and are supposed to be serving the people of the United States of America, and they are not supposed to be serving big businesses. I don't think anyone or any lobbyists should be able to buy a politician or donate money to a politician or political party whenever it is given in order to achieve a desired vote on legislature. Um, the sugar industry acts a lot in the way that the tobacco industry acted for years in not accepting responsibility for letting people know the truth about it. Everyone pretty much knows that sugar can make you heavy, but a lot of people don't know how addictive it is, and just how much it affects the brain and organs. If you want to see about the way that it was exposed to the tobacco companies and what they were doing, there's a movie called The Whistleblower, and it is a movie that shows how it was exposed, because for years the tobacco industry would not admit to the harm that they had been doing to the people, which people did know the cigarette tobacco was bad for them, but after it was exposed of all of the stuff that they were doing, like making it super addictive, then there were lawsuits. Uh, Wheat and grains are not grown the way that they used to be for thousands of years. It was around the World War II era that they started changing wheat, genetically modifying that it has a shorter stem, it has more grains on the stem, it has less chaff than it did because all that is genetically modified, and then it is sprayed heavily with herbicides and pesticides 30 days before it is harvested. They spray it again with herbicide, so it's made genetically modified to be resistant to herbicide. And now the weeds that are growing in with the wheat are adapting to be able to grow in the herbicide, and so they are just making more and more powerful things to spray the crops with. Wheat is something with gluten that there are a lot more allergies to gluten because of the changes in how the wheat is genetically modified and all the chemicals sprayed on it. And people like me that have autism that sometimes have more of a problem with digesting gluten than the average person does. Corn is genetically modified to resist herbicide too. There are other crops that are genetically modified, and whenever they do that, we don't always know how healthy they are, and we know that they sometimes are not as healthy. Uh, you're talking about how sugar affects the brain. People addicted to sugar, the brain scans they do of them, somebody who is addicted to sugar who just had a lot of sugar intake, their brain lights up the same way as a person's brain lights up who has ingested cocaine. And when you look at somebody who is withdrawing from sugar, their brain lights up the same way on a brain scan as somebody who is withdrawing from opiates. As far as the spiritual aspects of food addiction, the Bible refers to overeating as gluttony, and it's also often associated with alcoholism. You see the two mixed together often. Uh, a lot of Christians will look down on somebody because they are an alcoholic or in the past drank a lot and have struggled with that. And even if they've overcome it, some Christians and some churchgoers, because not everybody who goes to church is saved, will really look down on the alcoholic, but they will see nothing wrong with going and abusing their bodies with food, and you can actually get just as drunk on some foods like sugar as you can get drunk on alcohol. Uh, the biblical viewpoint of food addiction is gluttony or overeating is that they see it as being a sin. So there are people that say that addiction is both a sin and a disease because of the way that it affects the organs, including the brain, and because it's a chemical dependency. But what the Bible says is it sees it as more of a moral issue. For more help in overcoming food addiction and dealing with it, you can go to oa.org. That's oa.org. And there are other groups that help with food addiction, such as Food Addicts Anonymous and Full of Faith and Grace Eaters Anonymous. But those are not programs that I use. Uh, the way of overcoming any addiction in 12-step recovery or in other recovery groups is pretty much spiritual. We don't have the recognition through the DSM of food addiction, although there is binge eating disorder, and that is a lot of it has to do with the legal thing is of the companies that sell sugar buying the politicians because they know that if they admitted that it was an addiction, that they would have to have treatment centers and that there would be lawsuits over it, which I can understand how that's a little frivolous, but it would be nice if we had places for people who have addictions like me to food, which I've been in trying to recover for years. It would be nice if we had a place to go to help us get started the way that people with other addictions do, like a rehab. And that doesn't exist because it is. It maybe it exists in the new DSM because it was just revised, the DSM 5 TR. I'm not sure about that, but I know that it was not a diagnosis in the DSM-5. So if you want more information on food addiction, you can go to OA.org, and the one author is Kay Shepherd. Caroline Leaf also wrote some about food addiction, and she's a good writer, but she does use a lot of inside jargon and words that you will have to look up because uh, she's very educated and she just uses more complicated words. But that's all for today. I hope you enjoyed this video.